There we go. Recording is now officially in progress. And now, without further ado, I present Melissa Kahn, Co-Executive Director of Sasko River Center, who will be presenting sensory and stress.
Hi, everybody. Let me just share the screen. Did that work for everyone? Great.
It does.
Fantastic. Okay. As Mark had said, we are going to be kicking off our parent discussion series with the topic of stress and sensory. I'm going to just, move to the next slide here. Okay, so this whole year, for the school year, we're actually going to be doing the theme of stress. And as Sasko is filled with many multidisciplinary clinicians, we are going to be kind of addressing it from many different perspectives. So the next one that we have will be by one of our aroma practitioners who will be talking about using aromatherapy to help with stress and emotional well-being. Then we have our head of clinical testing, which is David Perino, our neuropsychologist, and Deanna, who's the head of the OT lines. And they're going to be talking a bit about using tests and evaluations to see if it's actually a sensory issue or if it's stemming from something different. And then another OT and another psychotherapist is going to be presenting on different hidden factors of stress. So things that we might not be able to see, but that impact our mental and physical well-being. And then there'll be a lot of other ones coming up throughout the year. This was kind of just all I could fit on one slide. But if you guys want to, you could always go onto our website and see what else is going to be presented. So just a bit about myself. Mark had introduced me. I am an occupational therapist as well as the co-executive director at Sasko. Sasko, just in case anyone who doesn't know, is a multidisciplinary child development center. We work with children, adolescents, families. We have about 75 different clinicians, psychologists, learning specialists, psychiatrists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists. And we work from a very collaborative and comprehensive viewpoint to really address all aspects of what might be going on with a child and their family. Myself, I began, oh gosh, about 20 years ago now, working in the school systems and working with Birth to 3 in New York City. And then I wound up finding my way into sensory processing and loving it and really kind of specializing in anything I could get my hands on related to sensory processing and furthering my education with auditory programs and using auditory programs to also address kids' sensory needs. I also have designed our 3 sensory spaces with Mark, actually, who's on this call. So the 2 of us designed the 3 sensory gyms in Stamford, Darien, and Wilton. Would love creating sensory supportive environments in homes, schools, anywhere really. And besides my clients and families that I've worked with, I'd say that my greatest teachers has been my 6 children. So I have 6 kids. They range at this point in age from 11 to 19. So I've got 2 in college, 3 in high school, and 1 in middle school. But they have been the best gifts and kept me on my toes all these years. So today, what we're going to be talking about very briefly is what is stress. Really going to be addressing it more from an OT perspective and finding out how sensory processing can look like stress and anxiety. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use our sensory systems to address and help with that, as well as different strategies, so that we'll make sure that you're leaving here with some actual take-home strategies today. So, what is stress? Move my, okay. So stress is really how we feel when we're under pressure or when we're threatened. And it happens when we're in a situation that we don't necessarily feel we can manage or control. So stressors can be physical, like where something's actually threatening us, or it could be something that we're worried about, like I was with this presentation. It can be, so that can also kind of define it as internal or external. It can also be positive or negative. So positive stress can really lead you to function better than you might have in other situations, or it can be wearing on you and really take a toll and make you feel exhausted and fatigued, or actually have some physical manifestations. Stress can also be perceived or actual, meaning that 2 different people can be in the same situation, but have extremely different reactions. And sometimes stress is really just more going through an adjustment. So it's not that there's something actually about to attack us or be difficult or painful or we need to be safe from, but it could just be that we're adjusting to a new situation in our life. Oh, sorry. There we go. I would know what I'm so getting used to these slides. So like I had mentioned before, stress can really be positive or it can be negative. It keeps us motivated. If you have like a really important test coming up, it might help you to keep your body awake longer and working harder. Or it can be really, really negative if, say, you have like too much on your plate for a really long period of time and you're not finding a way to relieve your stress, then it can really, really be a negative impact. But so I'm really going to talk more about what sensory processing is and stress. Is it sometimes that we get anxious and therefore that we're super reactive and sensitive or under aroused? Or is it that sensory is actually the problem? And it's a great question. And I'm just going to introduce a few concepts that we can think about to kind of start, delving into this a little bit deeper. So from an OT perspective, when we think about sensory processing and stress, we're really starting to wonder if it's the distress that our clients is experiencing is really secondary to the sensory processing or the challenges that that brings. And that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. So what is sensory processing? Sensory processing used to be extremely controversial and something that people would question. But what we now know without a doubt is that it is an aspect of human function and that every living thing processes sensations. So sensory processing is an actual neurobiological process of how we use what we're sensing to make sense of the world. So for example, when we wake up in the morning and you open your eyes, you feel the sunlight on your face, or you're processing sensation. When you smell the coffee and that's what wakes you, or you wish you smelled the coffee and you have a memory of that smell, that is also sensory processing. The touch of a loved one as they wake you up, or your feet as you're twisting around and you feel the sheet tugging against you, or you put them on the hard floor or the soft carpet. Is it cold? Is it warm? As they touch that surface, what is it that you're feeling? This is all sensory processing. So it impacts all aspects of life. And if we think of any aspect of human function, sensory processing is at the core and it supports that aspect of development. So again, it really describes how we feel, and how we feel impacts everything. And it's very hard to separate out sensation and an emotional state. And we'll learn about this also later in the presentation. However, most of us don't give any thought to our sensory processing. It occurs so automatically and without thought that we're unaware of how different we're all processing each experience. I like to use this as an example, especially since the next presentation is going to be about aromatherapy. But if you put lavender on in my house, for me, it would remind me of my grandparents. And for my husband, he would literally leave the room and think that I was like doing something mean to hurt him because he hates the smell of it. So we all have relatively healthy and functioning sensory processing systems. I'm sure everyone here is a parent. And as a parent, you can process sensory input well. Let's take the dinner time routine, whether you're cooking it or not. I'm sure it's overwhelming time period when you're a parent. And you are able to successfully and complete all the different tasks to cook a meal while attending to your spouse, to your kids that are asking you questions. You're multitasking and you're completing that agenda. We might all accomplish it differently based on our sensory preferences, but we are able to complete that task. So some of us might prefer silence and just want everyone out of the room, and we get it done and we can handle if someone comes in. And some of us like music on in the background, want a glass of wine, and it makes us more motivated to complete that task. Same task, different experiences. The commonality is that we all have functioning sensory processing systems that serve as our foundation for healthy development, our ability to function and participate, learn, and have a psychological well-being. I like to use this as another example. Let's imagine that you're on an open highway and there's no cars around you. It's just you and the open road. You can go as fast as you want. You can go as slow as you want. You can open your windows or keep them shut. You can turn on the music, play your favorite song, adjust the right volume. You might be wearing driving gloves because you like the way they feel on the grip of a steering wheel. But while you're in driving, you can have a really meaningful conversation with your kids in the back seat. It's perfect, it's lovely. And this is what it feels like when all of your sensory systems are integrating well together. Now imagine that the lane is closed and you're forced to merge your lanes and slow down. You're in a rush, but you can't speed up. It's freezing outside and your window is stuck open. You turn on the radio, but the volume knob is stuck at one level and you can't adjust it. Your exit's closed and you need to take a detour. And at the same time, the kids are melting down in the back seat and you're trying to maintain a calm, loving demeanor. If any of us does that, that's amazing. This is what it's like when there's a traffic jam in our ability to process information efficiently. I tried to bring as many of the sensory systems into this scenario to understand what it might be like when things aren't working. But this is also what it's like for our children when making, say, a new transition to school, or when they didn't get enough sleep, or if they're struggling to learn a new skill, or if they have sensory processing difficulties. Does anyone have questions yet? Okay. So this is how we tend to, as OTs, look at and evaluate sensory processing. Oftentimes, parents come in with a concern that's at the top of this pyramid. So they're concerned about something going on in school with learning, attentions, possible behaviors, transitions, basically just stress in general. And what we look at as OTs is we look at what could be occurring at the foundational level to see how it may be impacting those behaviors or stresses that the parents are experiencing with their children. Another connection to make here too is that when somebody is stressed, it's been shown that they actually perceive sensations more intensely. So when you're in a state of like anxiety, it's hard to concentrate or pay attention. And when you're in a state of hyper alertness or hyper awareness, or if you have a sensory challenge, it also can exacerbate anxiety. So we're going to take a look at the sensory systems and how each one of them can contribute to what may look like stress or anxiety, but I'm talking about this from a sensory perspective only. So everyone's heard of these 5 sensory systems, like hearing, taste, touch, smell, sight. These are the classic systems. Our kids learn about them in grade school. We learned about them in grade school. But they all have a little bit more to them than, I want to say, just meets the eye, but I probably shouldn't use another sense. So our vision system, yes, it helps us with seeing, but it also contributes to our ability to move and stay upright in space. It helps us to read, remember things, judge safety, and stay safe. And this is actually the same for all of the sensory systems that we're going to be discussing. They all help us to stay alive. Think of your auditory system. We think of that in terms of hearing and listening, but we never really think of it in terms of our ability to locate sounds, understanding the temporal quality of sounds, like how far away is something, how quickly is it approaching, where is it coming from? And that allows us to respond to things that's going on in our environment and make an appropriate plan of action. If you're unsure where something is or how close it is to you, it feels like it's on top of you. And again, that can contribute to that feeling of like, I'm not secure. I don't know what's going on. Is this on top of me? How far is it? Is there thunder in my house? So all of those auditory qualities are much more than just hearing and listening. Same thing with touch. Our touch is a hugely effective sense, and it's hardwired into so many aspects of our brain and has a lot of connections that support our ability to form attachments and relationships. And it also helps with our body mapping, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And it helps us, again, keep ourselves safe and have that sense of feeling safe and secure. There are also 3 less known, I know we only have a picture of 2, but there's 3 less known sensory systems, which are the vestibular system, the proprioceptive system, and the interoception system. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit more detail. So your vestibular system is located in your inner ear. And the reason that that is important to know is that the way that it functions is that there's fluid sitting in, they're like these little canals, and they're sitting in your semicircular canals. And as you are moving your head around in space in any direction, walking, bending over, however you're moving, it's sending, there's receptors in there that are sending messages to your brain to tell you how you are positioned in space. So this sensory system, it's important to remember that because later when we're talking about strategies, we're going to be referencing this again. But your vestibular system is your system that gives you your posture. So your whole entire first year of life is all about learning how to get vertical. Like, right, our kids are like rolling, they're trying to get up, they're trying to stand, they're learning, and actually balance is a learned system that comes through practice. So something that I thought was very interesting when I was studying vestibular system, and this could be, a whole hour just on the vestibular system, but that the highest form of vestibular processing is your ability to sit still. So everyone thinks of like vestibular as movement, move, but it's actually that ability to sit still that is its highest level of processing. It's also connected with your reticular activating system, and that's the sensory system that helps you with your alertness and your concentration and your levels of energy. So a lot of children who struggle with vestibular processing will also demonstrate challenges with the attention and sitting and remaining still. Another wonderful example of how these work together is fidgeting. So like a lot of times kids are actually fidgeting to stay alert and pay attention. It's the brain's way of saying, do something so that you can get back on track. So like when you see kids like fidgeting, like during a lecture or during dinner, or like they're actually trying to get their brains to get back on track and focus again. So our movement system is needed to feel organized and under control, and again, feel safe. It's what helps us move well, navigate our surroundings, and in turn be social. Like if you're not secure with where you are and how to process and move well, you're going to have a hard time engaging in like the ever-changing environment of other children on a playground. So let's talk a little bit about how our vestibular system can cause stress or be connected to stress. So if we were on the edge of a curb and we slipped off backwards for a moment, our movement system recognizes that we're turned around and it quickly would correct itself. And that happens automatically. But what's happening in our brain is that all sorts of alarms are going off and we feel for a moment that we're in a state of fight or flight. However, this situation is very useful and we get ourselves back up and we're able to recover, and it's helped keep us safe. Think of an elevator, for an example. Sometimes when you're standing on an elevator, there's this moment that everyone's looking around and you're like, are we okay? And it's because you're not getting enough information to that vestibular system to really assess if we're safe and which way you're moving. The same thing happens when you've ever been on a bus and a train and like the vehicle next to you moves. And for a moment, your vestibular and your vision system are not aligned, and it causes a little bit of confusion and stress. These I bring up as small examples that we're actually familiar with that can help us to emphasize with individuals who truly struggle with their vestibular system on a day-to-day basis and how that contributes to stress. So if we were to be left in a heightened state most of the day, it could present like an anxiety disorder or stress. And this is caused, in this case, by a lack of integration of the vestibular system with other systems, or it's misinformation from the system, or not enough information to the system, and it could quickly lead into the state of panic. So another one of the sensory systems that we mentioned is the proprioceptive system. This one's located in your muscles and joints. So it's stimulated by having your muscles and joints being pushed or pulled against. That's how you actually activate those receptors. And again, I'm mentioning this so that we can talk about it later with strategies. It can be passive or active. What that means is, have you ever had a massage and you feel so great and relaxed after? That's passive, but you're contracting and pushing into those really deep receptors in your muscles. Or active, have you ever felt a great feeling after a run or a good workout? Those are both proprioceptive inputs, but from very different ways of receiving them. Your proprioceptive system also helps orient your body parts in relationship to one another. For example, if you closed your eyes, you could still know exactly how you're sitting. So like if I close my eyes, I know where my hands are, I know my legs crossed on the other one. I'm not using another sensory system to understand where I am. I feel very safe and grounded within my own body. However, when this system is unreliable or inconsistent, again, or not giving you enough information, then your arousal goes up, your brain's alarmed, and you become hyper vigilant or overly observant of everything in your environment to understand where it is, since you can't really rely on your own body to give you that information. An example of this that we've probably all experienced is if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and your arm has gone past the points of pins and needles to where it's actually asleep and you don't even know if it exists anymore. And you become like a bit panicky. You're like, oh my gosh, I've lost my limb. But it's actually when your proprioceptors aren't working well. And then again, it's not an example of an anxiety disorder, but it's an example of a response to how that sensory system is working or not working or giving misinformation. So we really need these systems to be working well and need to see how they're working before we can rule it out.
Melissa, pardon me, 1 second. Could you on your screen click the do not show this again? No, like below.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
You guys don't want McAfee? What was it? I don't even know what that was.
Maybe later.
Okay. So the other sensory system that has been more recently talked about, so it's been around forever, but it's been more in studies and spoken about, is what's called interoception. And it's not, it hasn't been as discussed as much as it probably should be, but it's our internal sense. So it's the receptors that's in our organs and our skin. So it's helped to understand what your body's needs are. So like, can you tell when you're hungry or full? Can you tell if you need to use the bathroom? And the reason I'm mentioning this is because lately I've been hearing a ton of concerns about, my child doesn't know when they have to go to the bathroom. My child doesn't eat at school, like just a lot of these comments. And so it really made me want to bring it up today, just as like another sensory system to be aware of. It's also knowing what to do about it. So sensing pain and knowing how to relieve it, or sensing hunger and knowing that that's hunger, like knowing what that feeling is. A lot of times kids aren't able to understand what that is, or even realize that they're nervous or that they're anxious and that it's not that they're hungry. Because there's some kids that are eating, trying to figure out if that's what it is to relieve it. So being able to understand like that regulation of emotions and how to control that behavior and feel sensation and recognize what it is and how to calm themselves. So again, it's really hard to tease this one out. I just think it's something to be aware of that we can talk about or consider as well. And then another example of how the sensory systems have been impacted or are impacted by stress is when there's a multisensory issue. So when all of the sensory systems are having a hard time being used at once. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of our kids, especially with COVID, have been either homeschooled or less social or going back into school. Some of them are going to school for the first time because it was like during preschool and now they're transitioning to kindergarten. But if you think of a school environment, this is actually where we see a lot of the multisensory difficulties pop up and look like behaviors. There's, bells that are going off in the hallways. There's visual posters everywhere. There's echoes in the lunchroom. There's unpredictable children that can knock into you by mistake. So your nervous system is constantly being vigilant and trying to keep you safe. And you appear as if you're anxious or aggressive or behavioral. But again, in this situation, if it's stemming from a multisensory issue, it's coming from the sensory processing. And that's when we ask again, is this actually anxiety and stress or behavior, or is it stemming from a sensory need that we can address from the sensory perspectives? A lot of times these kids as well are using all of their energy to get through the day. And so they're fine in school and then they come home and they melt down, or they're so reactive in school because their sensory systems are on such high alert. So it could make a child who's struggling with these sensory processing issues appear anxious or aggressive. So just wanted to bring that also to our attention. Anyone have questions so far? So this is a visual way of looking at how sensory processing is coming in. So the arrows on the bottom over here are like different events, sensory processing events. And then these are different lines of what's happening with our arousal system. So I want to, for a moment, pretend that we're this yellow line. So let's say that we are, have to get to a meeting. And as we're on the way to the meeting, we realize that our kids have missed the bus. Already our arousal is going up because we're like, oh no, we now have to fit in time to get our kids to school, drive them to school. So you grab your coffee, you get in the car and you're going to school. And then all of a sudden you hit a pothole and the coffee spills all over your shirt. So now again, your arousal is going up. And then you get to the school, you drop off your kid, and as you're on your way to the office or to whatever meeting you're going to, you get a call from the school nurse that they're sick, they have a temperature, and you have to come pick them up. So you go back, you quickly get them, you figure out how you're gonna, manage having a child with you while you're trying to get done your meeting, and you're in that situation. And then you finish your meeting, you're on your way home, and you get a flat tire. Again, you're like higher and higher on this arousal chart. And then you get home and your spouse says, why didn't you make dinner? Why is dinner not ready? Or why didn't you pick up my dry cleaning? And you snap. And it was a simple question. It's just like, did you remember to pick up my dry cleaning? But you at that moment are so on edge and have just had it from the entire day that this tiny little question that would normally not have been anything, you'd be like, oh, nope, sorry, I forgot, or whatever you might respond as, has made you snap and yell. This is what the cumulative effect is of sensory challenges and how something small, because sometimes I hear that, I don't understand, they were fine and the smallest little thing triggered them, or they just had like a meltdown and I don't even understand why that happened. But we're going to look at how to look at kind of sensory experiences in a different way, and how the cumulative effect of these sensory experiences can actually also impact our children. It could be as simple as being run down and not getting as much sleep, or it could be that they spilled a drink on them and tactile really bothers them. And so later on, when a kid bumped into them, they pushed. Like it can have those, that kind of add up effect where they've kind of gone past their own independent ability to regroup and process. And so for kids in particular, we've all developed our own ability to calm down. Like I could have taken a deep breath in the middle of that, or been like, I just need a moment before I go on to the next part of my day. Like we have strategies and ways of regulating ourselves. Our kids don't necessarily have those, or know when, especially our younger kids, they don't necessarily know when to take a break. So that's when adult prompting, or maybe they get in trouble, but prompting and trying to help encourage them to take those breaks throughout their day, or help regulate their sensory systems back down. And we're going to talk about that. So we'll have some strategies. I just put this in here as kind of signs that we can watch for in terms of recognizing when our children may be getting to a point before they've gotten to that point. So we're going to get to strategies a little bit, but even like fidgeting, like I know one of my own kids is always like, when they're nervous, like I just see them picking their fingers all the time, or fatiguing quickly, or fatiguing sooner than their peer group is fatiguing. That could mean that they might be expending more energy throughout their day. Frustration tolerance. A lot of times that can come with, I'm bored, or like impacts the self-esteem, where they're not really sure how to navigate it, or they're at such a state of overwhelming that they just kind of use these, I'm bored, I can't do it, I give up, because that they're already struggling, or just zoning out. Sometimes kids like are not really listening. They're just like in their own zone, and you think that they've processed something, but they haven't quite processed something. So these are just some behaviors or signs to look for when it might be good to implement a strategy or a sensory break. So we've spoken a little bit about what sensory processing is, and I thought it would be fun to get a further sense of how it could present for ourselves so that we can be aware of how to address it from many perspectives. So each of our sensory systems can actually be alerting or calming for us. And since I realize I have talked quite a bit already, I'm going to not spend too much time on this so we can get to strategies as well. But this is about the tactile system. So I don't know if you're aware of like how you yourself processes tactile, but it helps to understand how it can be alerting or calming so that you can also understand how that might be for your child. So are you right now, have you noticed, are you sitting like with a blanket on you, or do you like to have something really cozy on? Are you like dreading putting on like jeans? Do you like to have a fidget? So like things like that, just making yourself aware of if that actually is alerting or calming for you. And it's funny, even like a lot of kids are so into those stress balls and those fidgets, like everybody has those and plays with them, but they're so varied. Like if you even think about that, right? Like some of them are like sticky, and you can tell by my face, I don't like the sticky ones, but like some of them are really sticky and like gooey. And then some of them are really like, you can they have like beads in them and you can push really hard into them. And like, for me, those are more calming. Some kids love like Velcro or like other little things that have more stimulation to them. So just kind of to be aware of the tactile sense. For taste, I was thinking of this one more as when I go on a long drive and I tend to get really tired, like what would I put in my mouth to stay alert? Like I would stop at a gas station and pick up Sour Patch Kids or something that was like very like alerting and awake for me, versus some people would want to chew gum, or, you know, what makes you feel calm, what makes you feel more awake. And obviously sours and things that are more pungent are more alerting, and things that are harder to chew and very thick, like gum or like dried mangoes, things like that, can be very calming for a sensory system. Breathing, this was one if we were going to do an exercise, which we're not going to, but just using the exchange of oxygen can be very, very calming. If you think about it, when people are overwhelmed, you always hear the. And the other piece to this that's really important is that a lot of times our kids who are really stressed or are having a trouble with their sensory systems impacts their postural system. And so they get very tight in their rib cages and they tend to be chest breathers. So just giving some feedback down at your rib cage, like when a child is breathing in or out, makes them more aware of getting the breath in deeper. And it's really, really calming. And it also adds a proprioceptive, which is also calming component to breathing, when you can get it more in your belly. So if you can even put your hand on your stomach and breathe in and fill that up versus breathing up here. So when you're really heightened or stressed, you tend to breathe very shallow. And when you're relaxed, you tend to breathe in your belly. And sometimes it is more of an awareness and a training component to that, but it is very calming to get the breath down lower and into your belly.
Melissa,
So, yeah.
there's two things. Somebody asks, they were going to ask how this applies to adults, but I think you touched on that. And then this question I don't understand, but perhaps you will. Hi, are stereotypies a type of vestibular imbalance, or does that fall into a different category, e.g. non-treatable? So I'm not sure what stereotypies mean, but perhaps you do, or perhaps Ellen would like to the person asking the question can ask a bit more.
Yeah, it's stereotypies is how it's called. It's basically like these things that someone does that they have no control over. So I had a teacher in 5th grade, for example, and her eyebrows would just like go up and down. She had no control over it, but it was like the body's, you know, kind of producing that. I've seen it in some kids, and I just wondered if that's a vestibular imbalance, and is that treatable through therapy, or is that a different condition?
So it actually depends where it's stemming from, but we do sometimes, like, so sometimes we see them when kids are going like through, I'd say like the preteen years also, and in adults, you sometimes see like these random tics come up, and they do sometimes get better or worse depending on what's going on for them, whether they're going through a growth spurt or a lot of stress. And so it depends on where it's stemming from that person. Like some of them are just a neurological hardwiring that is happening, and some are more able to be adjusted or they would be less as they're more, as their sensory systems are working more efficiently for them. So it would really need to be looked at to see kind of what the underlying cause is. But there is, if it is more increased in those behaviors by stress, it probably can be helped by using some of the sensory techniques.
Thank you.
Sure. Was there another one, Mark, in there? I didn't see the chat.
No, I think you addressed
Okay.
it was a question about the adults.
Okay. So vision as well, like I know a lot of people are very distracted by visual, but I don't know if you've ever walked into a store and there's just like so much going on that you can't really hear that someone's actually spoken to you, or just being aware of color. So blues and purples and lavenders are very calming on your nervous system, where like yellows and oranges are very alerting. So depending on what you're looking for, you can even use like tinted glasses that are just like fun to help with arousal. You can modify your environment to help with arousal. But sometimes kids or adults are very impacted by what's going on in the visual system. And so movement, we're going to talk about this more in just a moment, but just being aware, like, are you someone who needs to exercise all the time? Do you constantly need to get up and move? Like, are you looking for every opportunity to get up and move? Or do you prefer to be more subtle? Are you just like a slight body shifter, or do you really prefer to have those movement breaks? And what types of movement makes you feel good about yourself or not good about yourself? So if you went to an amusement park, are you going to avoid the rides? Are you preferring the ones that spin all over the place at the same time? Would you like roller coasters? Would you do none of those? I also think about kids sometimes when I see on the soccer field or on a field, and they are literally looking to slide tackle everybody. Like, I think they prefer to be down versus up. So they like looking for those opportunities to fall or crash into something. Again, it's probably has something to do with their movement system. Okay, so let's go into some strategies. I just wanted to mention briefly that there is a difference between doing a strategy and using a break. So strategies are more quick fixes that help you to maintain an arousal level. And they can also compensate for a skill that might be difficult. So you're modifying it so that you can make something easier for them. A sensory break is actually making a change to your nervous system that lowers your arousal. So we're going to talk about more in detail about sensory breaks, because they're really the best bang for your buck and how you're going to get the changes to last. Strategies, there are so many strategies, and if anyone has a specific question about something, we can definitely talk about some strategies as well. So with sensory breaks, I'm going to give you some that can be done individually, and I'm also going to give you some that you can do as a whole family, so that you can add them into all the siblings, that you can do them yourself. It's really better to do more breaks throughout the day than it is to just spend like an hour on a break. So if you could do something for 1 to 2 minutes during like really smart times, meaning let's do something for 1 to 2 minutes in the morning, and then when they come home from school for 1 to 2 minutes before starting homework, or right before bed, or when you know there's a tough transition time. So doing more little bits throughout the day. And if you think back to that yellow line that we were talking about, if I had just taken like a way of lowering my arousal again and taken a break somewhere in there, I don't think I would have exploded at my spouse. So it's just good to kind of have those, and that's a good visual to remind yourself of what you're doing. One big one isn't going to last all the way through it. And then also remember that each of the sensory systems can be alerting or calming. And the reason I'm saying that is that way you can be a detective for your own child. So think about your morning routine for you or for your child. Are you somebody who doesn't like it to be very bright in the morning? Do you need it to be like slowly wake yourself up? Or do you want someone to throw on all the lights, raise all the shades, and be like, well, let's go? Do you want music in the morning? Do you want to have like rock and roll wake you up? Or do you want something, you know, light or classical or nothing? Do you want someone to just whisper and be like, okay, it's time to get up, we're going to start our day? So just thinking about those things and how each of the sensory systems can impact a child who might be understimulated or overstimulated. So if somebody really likes a lot of movement in the morning, if you like a lot of movement in the morning, you can make it really fun to get their clothes on. Like it could be that they have to, you can make it a game. It can be crawl to get your shirt and crawl back to me, or, you know, jump to get your pants and jump back to me. Or are you someone who really needs things to be as simple as possible in the morning, in which case you'll lay out the clothes and leave it on, and they can help you with this, and you can leave it on a chair near the bed, and that's how they're going to get ready in the morning. So just thinking about like your routines and what's going on for the child or for you in those moments. And maybe it's a matter of marrying your two sensory systems and how those are going to work together for those routines. So we talked about the best bang for our buck. This is what I was talking about. So combining your vestibular system and your proprioceptive system makes the greatest amount of change. So you're activating that vestibular system, and then you're using the proprioceptive system to calm down. And the reason you do that is because your proprioceptive receptors release serotonin from the brain, which is calming and organizing, and you just can't really get too much of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pairing the two of them. And a fun way that you can do this, because I'm going to show you some vestibular activities and some proprioceptive activities, is there's an app called the Wheel of Names. And you can just put them on there, and then you press a button and it will choose one for you. And then you do the same thing for the proprioceptive input and it chooses another one for you. And kids really like that because it makes it something like a surprise and kind of fun. You could also put all of these activities in 2 cups on popsicle sticks, and they can pick one from each if you'd rather use that. So just the whole purpose of it, though, is using the vestibular and following with the proprioceptive. And what you're going to think of with these vestibular activities is the head. So we talked about this before.
Melissa,
Yeah.
sorry, I have a couple questions asking what app that was. What app was that?
It's called Wheel of Names. Like www wheel, like a circle wheel of names.com. Oh, sorry, maybe it's a website. Sorry. So the vestibular activities, the main thing that you're trying to think of with all of these is getting your head to tip down out of this upright position. So even if you're like telling the kids to touch the floor and then touch something high, if they're not tipping their head down, you're not really getting the most vestibular input. So you want to make sure the heads are moving out of that upright position. So Cobra Downward Dog is kind of in this picture, pretty self-explanatory there. Airplane spins is just really turning around. So the other way you're getting vestibular input is by quick spinning in either direction. Bug rolls would be if you kind of lie on your back and you rock back and forth. Reaching high and down low, side to side stretches. You can do just neck stretches if they're like in school, or if they're sitting at a dinner table. You could also do dot jumps or jumping. So you could put like a color on the floor of masking tape and then another color on the wall, and they have to touch the 2 colors that you tell them to back and forth. So just like little quick things. And if anybody really is interested in this, I'm happy to follow up and give many more activities. And then the proprioceptive activities, and we can all try this for a moment. Oops, sorry. Is if you put your hands on your head and you pulled down, like into your torso, you probably can already feel like calmness. It actually is like you're actually stimulating the receptors in the joints of your neck, which are compressing lots of little facets. And that's really calming and really, really quick. Giving yourself a big squeeze or a big hug, even just like stretching. A lot of times people forget that pulling the joints is as sometimes more impactful than pushing, because kids have learned to do the pushing on their own, like they jump, they crash to the floor, but hanging or suspending or being pulled is another more novel way of also stimulating those receptors that tends to be more impactful, because kids have really kind of gotten used to the other type of input. So if you find that you're doing a lot of compression and that's not working, try the distension piece of it. Progressive muscle relaxation is another really fun one. So they tense one area and then they relax it. And then you try to get them to tense a different area and then relax it. And again, it brings a very cognitive piece to trying to activate specific aspects of your body. So if you're like, let's just do our hands and then relax, or let's just do our arms and then relax. So again, you're kind of moving down the body and helping make them aware and getting a sense of feeling where they are in space again. You could also do chair push-ups. These other ones are helper jobs, like say you're doing dinner and you can give them the vestibular input, and then you're cooking and you're like, why don't you go water the plants, or just something to kind of help yourself like in the moment into your already existing daily routines. A sensory family meeting. For older kids, I think it's really important to engage them to help understand why you're asking them to do these activities, or even ask them to help come up with some activities. We've even had some families come up with some really cool ones and make YouTube videos and send them to us. And we have some YouTube videos on our website that you can look at of other sensory breaks that kids have made up. So if you ever do that with your child and you want to share it with us, feel free. But it's really for once they understand what they're trying to do, they can be so creative and come up with really cool ideas. And it's fun to engage the whole family into this. Like, what are some fun ways of doing it? And I thought it would be cool for us to just try one on our own. So I'm hoping you guys will be good sports with me. So this is a progression of using the vestibular, the probe. We're going to do some tactile and some respiration. So this is just a little bit more extensive of a sensory break, but again, it'll kind of get the idea. So if everyone can turn on their camera and stand up for a moment, I will do it with you. So this one's kind of geared more, oh, I guess I'll do it here, like on my knees. This one's geared more towards younger kids, but we have a lot of these, and we can give you some for older kids. So we're gonna pick an apple. I want you to look up and see what apple you're picking. And then I want you to put it in the basket. So you're looking down at your basket. Then you're going to pick another apple way, way up high, and you're going to put it down in your basket. And you're going to pick one more apple as high as you can get it, and you're going to put it down in your basket. So you can do this like 5 times. And now you're going to stomp the applesauce. So you want to really get large movements and like stomp, 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 and get as much of the juice out, because we're going to make apple juice. So we're going to keep stomping, make sure you get big squishes. And then we're going to squeeze out all the apple juice. So you're going to take, sorry, I don't even know how to get my camera here. So you're going to take your hand and like squeeze it all the way down and try to get it out as much as you can, and squeeze it out of your legs. It's splattered everywhere. Squeeze it out of your other leg. And then, because it's so hot and we did such a good job, we're going to cool it down. So we're going to take a deep breath into our belly. And I'd like you, for the count of 5, to blow down my fingers. So and you could do it one more time. And that was just like a quick sensory break, and you use a lot of your sensory system to do that. I was actually presenting a week ago with one of my colleagues, and at the end of the presentation, he said that his daughter was like melting down, and he said he went right into the other room and tried this, and it worked like a charm. So I was like, that's great, but it's fun. Okay, and then another thing that you can do is to create a cozy corner or a quiet space within your environment. So meaning, like, a lot of these other things we talked about are being more proactive. So trying to catch the nervous system before it's actually in a state of fight or flight. But sometimes you can't really do that, and your child is having a meltdown or isn't regulated, or you're not feeling regulated. And you can go into a space that helps them learn how to self-regulate. So it really gives them a break from all of the sensory stimuli. It's a calming space when someone's already overwhelmed or upset. It allows them to develop coping skills. And it's a great place to just utilize sensory strategies in isolation and promote some of their own independence and comfort. So if you look in the picture, right, there's one that's, of a school, and then there's one that's in a house. Things that you would like to look for or have at home is maybe a beanbag chair. It doesn't necessarily have to have something over it. It can just be in a corner. Something weighted, so you can use, we like to call it weighted snakes or weighted balls. You can even just take a huge tube sock and fill it with like beans and tie it, and that could be something weighted in there. Books, self-contained bubbles, a vibrating massager. You can use like the stress balls. You can use pictures that are just calming, flashlights, fidget toys, balloons, just to get that respiratory system working for them. So just things that they can use to regulate on their own. And then once they've calmed down and able to kind of lower that arousal, then you can have a conversation with them or do something else. So it really kind of allows you both to take some space. A lot of times I know parents are, what do I do when they're already having a meltdown? And this is a really good tool to use and be like, I can see that you're looking for a break right now. Why don't we go into there? And I'll talk to you in a moment. I realize I'm out of time here. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about the importance of co-regulation, which is using yourself as a sensory tool, but I do think that our psychologists will definitely do that in some of the other presentations. It's more just connecting and noticing what's going on for them and offering them a strategy. So like, I notice that your hands are busy. Would you like a fidget? Or I notice that you're moving fast. Let's take a break together. So kind of using yourself as well to help learn the importance of building self-regulation tools. And then along the same lines of this, it's just the importance of your own voice and your own pitch, like slowing down, talking quietly, getting down to their level, you know, taking slow, deep breaths. But again, I think this is something that we'll be able to get into with the psychologist later. These were just a few games that I had put in here that you can use as family game night. So really adding in a sensory aspect to all of our games. So to go through kind of quickly, like one of my examples was to do Uno with a twist, meaning that each of the color cards has a different activity that they would do while they put it down. I kind of wrote up one would be for older kids and one would be for younger kids. So for older kids, it'd be really fun with the wild card. If every wild card that got put out, they had to repeat the movement that was put out, that was done before. And then if they don't remember it, then they'd have to pick 2 cards and it resets to 0. So kind of making it like fun, but adding some movement into things that you guys can do as a family. Same thing with bingo. So ahead of time for older kids or for kids who have the ability to sit still for longer, you could write up 30 activities on a sheet. They could be things like 10 jumping jacks, 5 bug rolls, march in place, hold a plank, sing happy birthday, do frog jumps, like different fun activities. And then they could fill it out on the bingo card in whatever order you want. And you would pick out of a jar the ones that you've written kind of on Post-it notes and open them up and read them. And you could do bingo that way. And if it's a child who's struggling with attention, then have exactly 25. Like don't add 30 so that if that way every single turn they're getting to go versus it being like the luck of the right card. So that's another way of kind of keeping them engaged the entire time. You could do bowling. So you could use the pins at different distances. You could use different weighted balls to work on their proprioceptive system and grading their force and getting that heavy work. You could have them throw the ball between their legs. So you're getting the vestibular input as well. Or you could throw it across their body. And then that way it's working more on core strength and crossing midline skills. So again, another kind of like fun, simple thing you could set up around the house. Maybe like older siblings can help younger siblings, or you can set it up like, so just kind of getting things that are quick and easy. And then the last one I was just going to put up here. And again, this is on our website. So you could actually print up this page. It's called Roll the Dice, but it already has the activities on it. And so they would roll the dice 5 times and then they would go in the order. So like roll 1 would be stomp your feet 10 times. And then the second roll, say they got a 3, would be build an obstacle course and complete it 3 times. So I think this is just, I created this more so that a lot of times people are like, I don't know what to do really quickly. Like it's hard to think of things when I'm already like multitasking. And so this is something that's already ready for your use that you can add in, and that will also help with giving a sensory break and helping with the whole family and the dynamic. I know I raced through the activities really fast because we were out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you and see if anyone had questions.
I also wanted to add that everyone who's registered will get a copy of this PDF, so you will have these slides for reference on that PDF as well as whatever you might be able to get from the website. All right, there was a question in the chat. Sorry, I didn't see that. Let's see here. What do you find the most effective, impactful activities for children already in fight, flight, freeze mode with immediate calming response?
I think, again, I would probably help encourage them to like limit the sensory stimuli around them. And depending on your child, giving them like a hug, but making sure they're okay with it. So like, it depends on, sometimes children who are in a fight or flight are in the flee mode and they just want to run and get away. So giving them a space to do that in. And then sometimes children who are in that mode are very accepting and wanting some of that heavy input. So it really depends on the kid.
Do you offer any family sensory sessions? That's a great question.
We do. We definitely do that.
Okay. How can they find out more about that? Email you?
Yeah, they can email me.
Okay. Okay, this is another good one. What do you do in the moment when your child responds by yelling? I usually just yell back louder, but I don't think that's the right answer.
When they respond yelling at you, it kind of, it's again, it's the same sort of a thing. I wouldn't really, I would probably say you're talking in a really loud voice, and then I would start to lower my own voice down. And if they're still yelling at me, I would encourage them to go to the calming space before continuing that conversation. It depends how old the kid is and how unsafe they're being. So there's obviously a lot of other factors, and I'm speaking very like generic here because it sometimes kids are yelling and running in an unsafe manner. So we would have to take that into account as well.
I think a lot of these questions.
Aromatherapy too. One of our aroma practitioners on the call that I spoke about earlier, and she was saying that there's aromatherapy that you can use as well.
All right.
Unless you're in my household and you have 8 people, and everyone has a different impact for smell.
Do you find that therapy will help get these sensory systems to quote normal, or will someone always just have to live with atypical sensory systems?
No, I definitely find that you can get the sensory systems to respond more efficiently and accurately. We all already have our own sensory stuff going on. Like we all have sensory preferences. We all have things that we try to avoid. It's really more a matter of if it's impacting our day-to-day life and preventing us from engaging and participating in things the way we want to. I can never say that we would get rid of all of the sensory preferences, but being able to function, being effective and social and adaptive human beings, that is definitely something that we can do with the sensory systems. Oh, Mark, do you remember where it's on the SASCO website, right? Someone's asking.
What's that?
Roll the dice game.
You know, I don't know exactly. I'll have to find it and I'll email it with the materials from this afterwards. So I will definitely send that out with this today or tomorrow. And someone wanted to say hello. Okay.
You want to just put is my email in the chat so people can email me after too?
It's not in the chat. You can put it there. I'll put it there now. But also it's on the PDF.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. If anyone has any other questions or wants to have a conversation, I'm happy to make myself available. And we'll also can email you materials or whatever else you guys need. But thanks for being such a wonderful audience.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. That was excellent. Everyone else, appreciate your attendance. And like I said, we'll send you some follow-up materials in a moment. Well, by tomorrow anyways. And if you have any follow-up questions, the email is in the chat box. You can email back to hello@Sasko River, and that message will also get to Melissa or however else we can help you. And Bugsy says goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.